you posed the original question and I thought about, well, why invest? And I was thinking of it from the perspective of, everyday New Zealanders, if you like, but not people who are necessarily highly working in the area of professionally investing and so forth. I think for all of us, you invest to achieve the dream, be able to fund dreams and goals for the future, and whether that's down payment for your first home, or it's being able to set up a foundation and make a change in communities, or whether it's investing for retirement. It's really having that ability to fund a vision, your own vision of what you want the future to be. So the interesting thing then is saying, well, it's a good thing to invest, for everybody to invest. It comes down to, well, what do people choose to invest in and why? And it seems to me people do invest in what's familiar. And I sort of, having lived most of my working life in the United States and then coming back to New Zealand in 2013, it's really interesting to see that the norm in New Zealand is investing in real estate, and particularly residential real estate, but to some extent commercial, whereas the norm, at least of people that amongst my friends and colleagues in the States, was to invest to buy stock, and some balance between corporate stocks and bonds, and have a bit of funds set aside for startups. And usually for a lot of people, they're not picking individual stocks, but are investing in through mutual funds or managed funds. So quite interesting, the difference, and a perception, I think, in New Zealand that stocks in companies, and particularly smaller entrepreneurial companies, is much riskier than investing in real estate. So I think there's sort of part of the thinking about how to change the future is how to make sure everybody sort of fully understands the relative risks, and that ratio of debt to income. And of course, I'm on the board of Westpac New Zealand, the bank here, and of course the Reserve Bank is sort of talking about should there be debt to income criteria for mortgages and so forth in the future, is one of the things the Reserve Bank is thinking about. So I think the risk of investing or being too heavily invested in real estate isn't maybe very obvious, and it's that if interest rates go up from these abnormally low levels, or historically low levels, drop in housing prices, the lack of liquidity from having 80 to 100% of your investment in real estate, so lack of liquidity and lack of diversification, because at least with investing more in stocks, you can be spread across a number of industries. You can be in stocks within New Zealand, but also overseas in the US or in the European Union or in Asia. So I think that relative risk is not very widely understood maybe by a lot of people. I'm absolutely in favour of everyone buying their own home to live in, roof over your head, of course, but it's, what do you invest in beyond that? And then the other thing, in looking at it from the perspective of the exposure I got to what's happening in New Zealand at Callahan Innovation, just about every company I'd talk to, I'd say, what's holding you back from growing bigger, faster? And they say, I can't hire enough skilled people or find the skills I need, and I can't find the capital to grow my business. So it seems to me that when so much money is tied up in the bricks and mortar of houses, which after all, a house is just a house, it can still just house a family, there's not really any value created other than what's driven by demand. Whereas if that same money is going into these exciting companies, Stephen, that you're describing, far more value created, and I think that plays a role in that productivity gap that New Zealand has, that we're not seeing the productivity because we're putting all this money into something that isn't inherently any more valuable than it was a year ago or 10 years ago. It's just a house or an apartment that you can live in, or a factory that you can work in. But if it's in businesses, they've got this much greater capacity to grow. And this fear about the risk of technology, I think you overcome that by having funds where you can invest in a fund that's got 30 companies in it, spreads it across, or funds that invest in different industries, so healthcare, for example, or some of the very exciting artificial intelligence companies emerging, and as well as in natural resources.